And we are recording. Where's my thing? There it is. Is it on? Yes, it is. Oh, wait. How do we start the slideshow from this slide? This one? Yes. Well, if I start slideshow, it's going to start at the beginning. But this did it. So, oh, is the sun still coming through? Not really. It's not so bad. I mean, it's like one tiny little sliver, which happens to be right where my head is, by some bit of luck. Okay, so during the test, so we talked about the outline and everything. Let's talk about thesis. In fact, let's go to the last slide first before I continue talking about thesis, because end. Okay, there we go. I just went straight to the end. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of the thesis before. Y'all learn about thesis in school? I think we already talked about. So I just want to talk about the importance of thesis in my class. In any essay, the thesis is, generally speaking, going to be the most important tool for helping the reader properly understand the material and its purpose. And the thesis is a statement of purpose for an essay. It gives the rest of the writing a reason to exist. So just so you know, without a thesis stating the purpose or point to prove in your paper, any essay this semester will automatically receive no higher than a 50, even on the narrative. So it may be that the full nature of the thesis may not appear until the conclusion, because you may not want to talk about. Well, let's talk about the thesis first, but before I get into that, but what a thesis for a narrative essay should contain. Just make sure you include a thesis, because we're about to talk about it. Make sure you pay attention to what it is and how I want it done. If you don't put it in there, 50. Sometimes I might give a little more credit for one that's implied, but not often. If I just can't tell what you're trying to say, then I'm not going to be too generous. So let's go back, talk about thesis. So it's an essay's main idea, the idea that all the points in the body of the essay will support. A thesis may be implied, but it's usually stated explicitly in the form of a thesis statement. In addition to conveying the essay's main idea, the thesis statement may indicate the writer's approach to the subject and the writer's purpose. It may also indicate the pattern of development that will structure the essay. That's actually probably going to be true in all of our essays, is in some fashion you'll be able to tell basically from the thesis what kind of essay you're talking about. Whether it's narrative, cause-effect, compare and contrast, argumentative. It should be clear just from looking at the thesis statement alone what type of essay it is. Because a compare and contrast essay will mention the two things being compared. A cause-effect will mention causes and effects in some fashion. Narrative will talk about in something that happened to me or to somebody else. And an argumentative essay will try to prove some point and talk about evidence that relates to it. So I think the thesis statement is going to do all of those things in any one of those cases. Do y'all have teachers at school who just read PowerPoints all day? Do y'all still have that? That shouldn't be a thing. Do y'all have college teachers who do that? Have you yet? Really? Really? That's interesting, because I took Newhouse, the government teacher.
Yeah.
See, that's interesting, because I took him when I was in college for government, and we didn't have PowerPoint really widespread back then, so he didn't do a whole lot of reading. He would just talk.
Now he does like PowerPoints, and then he'll like get off the computer and talk on his stuff.
I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I will probably generally, just so you know, on slides, I feel like the exact wording is fairly important. I will read them, word for word, like the one where it's talking about what a thesis is, every aspect of it. But on most slides, I'll try to go, I'll try to improvise. Is that what y'all said?
Did you make the slides?
Oh yeah, I made all this. I don't use a publisher's like pre-made slides. I mean, I've heard of teachers that do.
Yeah, they do.
No, I gotta do my own thing. I can't have somebody else telling me you're gonna teach exactly this. In fact, that happened once and it didn't go very well. I don't want to say I got in a fight, because it wasn't even remotely like that, nor did I get in one. But I told somebody who's boss. I told them, you're boss, but I'm not going to do this. I'm kidding. I think I made all of that up. I don't think any of that was true. But I did have to teach somebody else a syllabus one time, and that was a nightmare. So yeah, all of mine are made by me, but I'm trying not to read them word for word every time. So when you're developing a thesis, it's going to come out of all the ideas that you've been working with as you've been doing your pre-writing, because remember that's what we were talking about, right? Pre-writing, gathering those ideas, putting them into an outline of some fashion. And you might not be a big outliner, I understand, but I don't know. I feel like the best essays come together since, essays need to have some sort of structure. Like if you know what that structure is ahead of time, instead of just you start writing and hope for the best. I feel like the essays just work out better that way. So if we look at that cheating outline, where it's broken down into during test, after test, in college. So during the test, he found the test hard, saw Jeff cheating. After the test, he got angry. He wanted to tell somebody, but he dismissed the idea, said, I'm not going to do that. Now in college, though, he understands the implications of cheating and understands the goals of education. Did I mention the one issue that I had with this outline?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't see what happens to Jeff, which I have a big problem with. I mean, what does he do now? Has he gathered trash? I mean, I don't really know. Like, was he still flipping burgers at McDonald's or something? Like, hasn't gone to college? I'm not sure. He might sell drugs. That would be the worst with him. Maybe I get shot today. But we don't know what happens to Jeff. That's the issue that I have. But you can kind of tell just from the outline here that the thesis could be roughly, cheating keeps students from rising toward expectations and limits what they can achieve from grade school all the way to college. Because I don't know exactly how far back the outline goes. It could go back to like grade school, but if you want to say like, I don't know, have y'all seen somebody in your school? It's real sad, but like a kid who just never really had to learn to read. Like they kept just cheating off their buddy and like doing a side-eye thing, and now they're like in 12th grade, and like maybe they seem like a normal kid, but they always go like to some other area of the school for most of their classes because they just can't read. Because sometimes this happens. It happens in a school where a kid will make it all the way to 12th grade and they read on like a first grade reading level. And sometimes, of course, it's coupled with a disability. Sometimes it's just cheating happened the whole time and they just never felt the need to actually learn. So that kind of thing does happen. So cheating keeps students from rising toward those expectations. So hopefully you can see from that outline, that example, that the thesis is the main idea of a piece of writing. It's the statement of what the essay is trying to prove. What do you think you'll be proving in your narrative essay? Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it has to be that a lesson is learned, just like I would say that a theme in a piece of literature doesn't have to be some lesson the author is trying to teach us. But it does need to be that you change from the experience. That could be good, that could be bad. I mean, the lesson, you might not even really have learned a lesson. You just sort of, the experience changed you and this is how you are now. Sometimes it could just involve you being completely distrustful of other people, depending on what you're writing about. But yeah, most of the time, in a narrative essay, you'll be trying to show how you changed from that first experience. And most of the time in this class, I will have you directly state your thesis. I really don't want you to try to imply it. On the narrative essay, I can understand implying it in the intro, but eventually explicitly stating, what it is you're trying to show in this essay. I put that sometimes you can imply it, but in all honesty, whenever people try to imply the thesis, they get bad grades. It's all I've seen. People, I was like, really, that's what they were trying to say? It's kind of like when they tell me later. I was like, what were you trying to say with this? And they're like, oh, this. And I was like, oh, just put that in there because I wasn't getting that at all. But if I see it first, then I start reading your essay, then I might be kind of, in essence, like coached to be looking for those things. And so it might come across better. But just always try to include the thesis directly. You can come up with your thesis at any time during the writing process. I usually like to know some idea of where I'm going when I start writing, so I'll come up with a thesis beforehand, even if it's not set. I had a professor in college, he was telling us that when he wrote his dissertation, you know what a dissertation is? It's like the last thing you write to get your PhD. So you've got like your bachelor's degree, and then you get your master's degree, and then you go on to a PhD, which is like 3 or 4 more years of school, sometimes 5 or 6, depending on how much time you have. Because I think it's like 70 degrees past the or 70 hours past the bachelor's, or 60 hours past the bachelor's, which is in essence, I mean, it sounds like only 2 more years of school, but the classes are about 5 to 6 times as hard. You can only really handle about 2 a semester, because 2 a semester of PhD classes is like a full load of classes of like 5 classes undergrad. But this guy was like, he was writing his final thing for his dissertation. And by the way, this teacher I had, he was an English teacher, English professor, so he had a PhD in English, but he also had a PhD in math. Yeah, he was an interesting guy. So he wrote his whole dissertation, like 100 and, I think, 20, 30 pages, he said. And next to his thesis, his advisor, his dissertation advisor, wrote the word no and underlined it. And he was like, huh? He went and talked to the guy, and he's like, what? Why did you do this? And he said, all of your data that you have here points to exactly the opposite of what you seem to be trying to prove. And he was like, oh. And he looked over his stuff and found that, yep, it sure was. So back in the days of typewriters, him and his wife had to get together and retype 130 pages of a dissertation to prove the opposite point. Hopefully you don't get in a situation where you're having to change that much, and we're not going to write any 130-page papers in this class, just so you know, in case you were worried. Won't happen. But don't consider the thesis to be set. It could change along the way. It might not change much, but sometimes you might have the thesis at the top of the paper, realize you added points, and go, oh, that kind of changes the focus that I had, so I'll change the thesis up a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't consider it to be like set in stone. If I was going to take a picture of or write down directly any slide in this whole presentation, it'd probably be this one. It says, according to the book, an effective thesis statement clearly expresses your essay's main idea, communicates your essay's purpose, and is clearly worded. Clearly expresses your essay's main idea, communicates your essay's purpose, and is clearly worded. All of those things are necessary to creating a good thesis. Now here's some bad thesis examples. Maybe you can tell me why. My instructor has an attendance policy. Community colleges are awesome. Facebook attracts college students. I mean, it says down below exactly why, so maybe I should just read that. Did any of y'all know why those are bad examples?
These are too general.
Good job. Yeah, they're all too general to be a thesis. That's right. Because, I mean, my instructor has an attendance policy. I can prove that just by looking at the syllabus. Boom, done. Like, why would you write a whole paper on that? Community colleges are awesome. It's a bit too vague. Like, I don't really know exactly what you're talking about. Like, community college is awesome. How? It is. You know, need more. Facebook attracts college students. I don't even know if that's true anymore. It's probably Instagram, right? I don't know. What do y'all use now? Twitter is still used?
Twitter's making a comeback.
Making a comeback? Probably because they added all those extra words. It's easiest to be funny on Twitter because you have like 200 and...
Twitter's the best app.
What do you have, like 200 and... How many characters now?
Oh, it's a lot.
It used to be 108. Was it 216 now or 224 or something?
No, there's a lot.
You still have to do it pretty quick. But you can post pictures, I guess, like Instagram, and you can say something really fast. You know, the dumbing down of society. Yeah, I imagine it's easiest to dumb down society with Twitter, so maybe. I mean, probably most people are using it because the president does, right? Let's see, he's popularized it. Community college does Facebook attract college students? Maybe it does, but I still need to know a little more. So I have something to follow when the paper's written. My instructor should change her attendance policy. So these are decent. Should change her attendance policy because it is bad. What's wrong with that one?
They don't say why it's bad.
Yeah, it's just bad. Like, I mean, I need to know something to some effect of why it's bad. For many people, a community college makes more sense than a four-year college university. Where's the problematic wording there?
They don't want it.
Yeah, what makes sense how? Like, why does it make sense? What is it about it? Social networking sites like Facebook can cause problems.
Like, which problems?
Yeah, what problems? Exactly. So I'm asking why or what do you mean? That's the kind of thing I need to clarify. So these I think are pretty good. Not perfect, but still pretty good. My instructor should change her attendance policy because it is unreasonable, inflexible, and unfair. I assume that through the course of that essay, that writer is going to show me how they're unreasonable, how they're inflexible, how they're unfair. That's an assumption I think I can make. What now?
Like, give an example.
Yeah, exactly. Examples will pop up. Now, I don't feel like you have to force all of your examples into the thesis, though. I mean, you don't want that to contain the entire essay. That's what the rest of the essay is for. Examples will be provided by the rest of the paper, but it's pretty good at least giving you an idea of where it's going to go. For many people, community college is more beneficial than a four-year university because they are cheaper and more personal. I mean, you can see right here in this 50-person class, so much more personal, right? I mean, that was a joke. You're supposed to, you don't really laugh a lot. Do I got to show you pictures of people falling down? Is that all that really gets you? Like, somebody getting kicked in a place that's not fun to get kicked? Did y'all just jaded? Like you're so jaded that like you're like school, man. Like I don't even like. What is school? That's stupid. I don't really know. Like what are you? Tired? Oh come on! It's 8. It's like the best part of the day. It's 8:30 a.m.
Yeah, I should be asleep.
On Saturdays. You know what I'm doing at 8:30 a.m.?
I'm at work.
Nothing yet. I'm laying down.
I won't be.
My wife hates it. She's like, come and help with the baby. And I'm like, it's 8:30 in the morning. She's like, you wake up every day. And let's not go over that. Social networking sites such as Facebook cause problems because they can relay news inaccurately to a large segment of the populace who use it as their primary news source. So that one seems to just focus on the fake news aspect of Facebook. So you can see the first one has, it seems like 3 different aspects. The next one has 2. Next one has 1. There's no real like right answer on how many you should cover. I mean, I already mentioned to you guys I don't really want the 5-paragraph essay, right? Where it's like you have to have 3 points that you hit one at a time. I mean, that's not even going to make any sense for your narrative essay, because narrative essay, depending on what you're writing about, the needs will change. So, and just while we have a second, did y'all know it's bad to consider? Like, I don't even know like what the alternative is these days, because this is all we do. But social media is not the best place to get like news and things. One of the reasons is because usually on social media, granted if it's just purely social media, but I think even Snapchat's branching out, isn't it? Purely social media would just be you're talking to your friends, and that's about it. And nobody's trying to post news or political things. Facebook, though, very much, there are groups that are posting news all the time. So using something like Facebook for your primary news source, the reason that's problematic is because, for example, if you are, let's say we have 2 people, one's very pro-gun, one's very anti-gun. The pro-gun person, when they're scrolling through Facebook, they're going to be like, you know, something says like, you know, Parkland shooting, many kills, pissing off people about guns. That person's just going to keep scrolling. And they get to a thing like, person with guns saves life at movie theater in such and such state. And you're like, oh, I like that. And then like you keep going and there's another shooting, and then you keep going and it's like, somebody has a gun and saves somebody. You're like, yes, this. And so you keep liking the things about guns being good. Well, Facebook goes, oh, he likes it when he hears guns are good. Let's start showing him gun good stuff. And so then eventually it stops showing you the negative news and only shows you positive news. So if there was like a Parkland shooting article, you'd see teacher says he wasn't allowed to bring gun to school, could have saved lives. And you're like, yes, you know, like that. So you're always going to see stuff from that lens of the way you like to hear it. Everything you say. But then like eventually it's going to, all you're going to see are the things that make you feel like you're right all the time. And that's what the danger, I think, of the internet has become, especially Facebook, is that you're never made to feel uncomfortable about anything. And you have the option of unfollowing people who post stuff that's not what you like to hear. And the same thing over here with anti-gun guy. He only is sitting there liking like, guns are a problem in society. Yes, like that. Gun saves life. No. Angry. And then keeps scrolling. Then all they see is how guns are bad, and they'll never see anything about how guns are good. So, I mean, that's the problem with social media and using it as your primary news source, is you're never going to see anything that makes you uncomfortable. I mean, I've even had a problem with using Reddit lately, because Reddit seems to sway to one side more so than another, and I feel like I don't see other types of news sources. I try to look for like the more unbiased ones, but it's difficult to wade through it all. That's just the problem with the internet. So that's something to keep in mind while we're on a side note here about Thesis. So remember, importance of Thesis. Don't have one, it's a 50. Be clear, be concise, give reasoning behind it before you start it. So that's that. We're not done. You're about to pack up, but nope. Is it this one? There we go. At 5. Narrative essays. It says descriptive. I'll probably skip actually much of this because I don't like talking about it. Not because it's bad. It's just boring. Depending on the types of essays you write in college, and probably, I mean, people plan on going to, I'm assuming a lot of people plan on probably going to A&M Commerce after this. Then some people probably have plans to go to, like, say, a UNT or like a UT, but then your parents will tell you, I can't afford to send you there, and you'll end up going to A&M Commerce. Then you'll probably have people who your parents have said, like, I went to Baylor, your grandpa went to Baylor, you're going to Baylor. You probably will go to Baylor. So you've got all kinds of different people from all different situations. You may end up writing really long papers on all kinds of different topics, depending on where you go to school and how seriously they take their essays in various disciplines. Sometimes you'll do like, say, isn't it unfair a little bit? Like you're like the way to avoid essays in college is to go into a field that's mostly math based, but then the math gets so hard that you can't really do it very easily. So then you're like, man, I just wish I was writing essays. But then you go back and essays are so hard, and it's a nightmare, right? There's no way to avoid essays and math at the same time. You're doing like quantum calculus. I don't even know if that's a thing. I might have made that up. You're doing all kinds of like crazy math, but essays will follow you throughout and if you ever get like a graduate degree, doesn't matter who you are, you're going to have to write some big, long 30 to 50, 70 page thing to get just a master's. And then for a dissertation, probably 120 to 150 pages. And it may include all manner of types of writing, including narration. They may want you to include like some sort of anecdote and some little stories about the experiences that you had during that experiment or something. But narration may appear in essays or constitute an entire thing. Tells a story by presenting events in an orderly, logical sequence. That's going to be very important to you guys. And narration should still contain a thesis. So I don't think it's going to get you out of that. Like, oh, it's narration, it's just telling a story, I don't need a thesis. I mean, even stories, literature contains a theme, right? Rarely do you see literature that has no purpose for being written. You might feel that way, but the author's trying to convey something. So the thesis and narration, this just says the same thing I said on the other slide. In this particular essay, it's going to be, I don't care about that either. Irrelevant. Yeah, we'll do this. So I want to talk about the thesis real quick, though. It does need to somehow say roughly what the experience is. I should be able to tell what topic you're doing. A place I had never been to before. That tells me it's which topic. Yeah, unfamiliar surrounding. Right. So I should tell which topic it is from that. And then you can just say, you can be vague in the thesis, because if you don't want to give, because the one way you're going to show how you changed, that's going to need proof at the end, near the end. Like you show how you do things differently now than you did before. So as a result of that, you may want to, as the nature of the narrative story and the way we tell stories, you may want to hold off on the proof and maybe even what it is that changed about you until the end. I understand that. But you should still at least make it clear what essay you're writing in the thesis, yes.
How would you put that thesis at the end? Like you don't want to give away like what it's about and everything until like at the end. Or do you want
for example, like let me say that let me think. When's the time when I went to an unfamiliar surrounding? Did I ever tell y'all like which one of these essays gets the lowest grade usually? Did I tell y'all that? Death of a loved one or illness, those usually get the lowest grades. Mostly because people take a lot of their emotions for granted and they don't feel like they have to explain them. Like if your grandma dies and you're upset, you think everybody's just going to understand that. So I don't have to explain why I was upset. Some people haven't seen their grandmas. Their grandmas are druggies. Some people's grandmas beat them. Like that doesn't necessarily explain why you had positive emotions toward your grandmother and were sad that she died. So just the nature of the relationship with grandmother doesn't explain. So you'd have to have a paragraph that included like what made grandma so great. Why were you so upset when she died? That should lead into that. The one that usually is done the best is first time in an unfamiliar surrounding, but it's got to be done where it literally is an unfamiliar surrounding. The people who usually have the best topic to write about are the people who have gone to Mexico to see family, because that's a different situation, different circumstances. Culture is kind of different from up here. People who say like, yeah, my first time going to like a skating rink. I'm like, that sucks. This is not good. Because nobody really learned anything. It was like, I learned I could skate without falling down. Like, whoop-de-doo. It's not anything that changed about the inside of you. That's just, you learned a task. You know, it's almost like the saying, I learned how to use a screwdriver. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's not that impressive. So usually people can say that the first time I went to Mexico, I significantly changed on the inside because I finally saw how my family lives, and it's way different. But to say like, oh, I went to a skating rink and then I went home and basically I'm the same person, and trying to make it sound different. Like maybe if there was a shooting at the skating rink, but that's getting to the violence topic, right? So that's different. So I wanted to let y'all know that usually that's the ones that, and really the best grade is culture, very different from your own. But so few people have an example of that they rarely write it. You know, how often do you meet somebody from a culture very different from your own? Not very often, right? I'm actually kind of sad. I mean, I know this sounds, y'all are going to feel like this is insulting. I'm going to stand up for a second. I know you're going to feel like this is a little bit insulting. But I really am sort of upset with the fact that I have all Quinlan students this semester in my dual credit class. Not because I don't like any of you. It's because one of the things that's cool about college and what I think is important about college is getting to be in an environment with people who are different from you. People you're not just used to. Like, I mean, y'all went through school all these years together, right? Now you're in college, and how is it different? Well, you're still in the same room with the same people. I mean, it's really not that much different. And so I usually like to have the low note people, because what happens is the social stigma of being around people that you don't know. Everybody chooses seats, but the other school people are choosing seats too, and they're like, where do I sit? And it's not always as simple. Like, you know, what happens usually is the low note students, they drive themselves, so they come in and sit all over the room. And then Quinlan comes and fills in around, and everybody's like, what do we do? Like, who are these people? And people are like scared to talk sometimes because it's like, I don't know what these people think. And eventually everybody kind of learns to, but that's more like what a college class is like. So I kind of, you see people from a different sort of, you have to admit, like, I mean, Quinlan, Lone Oak, even just the schools, probably very different culture, right? Lone Oak's just a very different school than Quinlan is. But anyways, thesis. Let's say that how big can I make this where y'all can see it? Let's get rid of navigation. Let's make this slightly bigger. In fact, we'll make the text bigger so you can see it. Can you see that? What do the words say?
Nothing.
Right, I haven't written anything yet. Good job. Y'all passed. Let's see. So if I was going to do an unfamiliar surrounding about the time that I... Yeah, I haven't gotten into a wreck. I'm a responsible driver. I haven't gone to Mexico. I'm trying to think of a time when I actually changed. I usually stay the same most times I do something. Nothing was different when I went to Comic-Con. Huh? That's not really an example of adversity or violence or danger. I mean, the pregnancy went fine. Everything went fine. The baby's culture was the same as mine because she was born into it. Unfamiliar surrounding was the same. I mean, we just went to a hospital. We hadn't been to that hospital, but it felt just like the doctor's office.
Unfamiliar surrounding because now you have to deal with, you know, the child and stuff. And like,
yeah, but it's like I said, when I say unfamiliar surrounding, that's a place. It's not a situation. So it can't be an unfamiliar situation. That's not the topic. So if anybody's planning on writing about an unfamiliar situation, realize that's not the topic.
Going from high school to college.
Going from high school to what now?
College to being a college teacher.
I think going to high school to college is actually pretty good.
Good job.
The reason, because in my case, I lived in Commerce, and y'all know what's in Commerce. Do you? Yeah, A&M Commerce. So I lived in it. I was going to the school in my town, and I told my parents very adamantly, I want to live in the dorms. They seemed very confused. But I did, and I was so glad that I did. So let's just say that if I know I'm writing a topic about unfamiliar surrounding, and I'm going to say that I learned to be independent and not rely so heavily, well, there we go. Like, oh, it's got to sound like it's one of the sentences that's, oh, why not just write a whole daggum introduction? How long will it take, really? No, that's too long. Let's maybe in the beginning I don't want to say exactly what it is that I gained from it, but it's like, I thought that going from high school to college would be a pretty significant change. I don't need the word. I don't need a comma. I don't know. I like commas sometimes. I really don't have a problem with this. Technically, I don't need a comma here. I don't. But I tend to like commas, to use commas for pauses, even if it's not grammatically correct. Does that sound weird? English teachers doing that?
No, does that mean you're gonna take off points?
Yeah, take off points if we do that.
No. Now I will take off points if yours looks like this. I thought that going from high school to college, that would I would really count off for that. Or if it didn't make sense where you put it at all. I thought that going from high school to college would be a pretty significant change, but I never could have anticipated exactly how much that change would be. And now I probably would not write something this cheesy sounding once I'd written the whole paper and gone back through and looked at the thesis based on what I'd written, re-looked at it and kind of revised it to where I'm just trying to give you like the clearest example of what you might end up seeing in the beginning. Now at the end, because you asked like what the difference in the thesis beginning and end, because that was originally what you asked, right? I know it sounds like maybe I had forgotten what you had asked, but I've been doing that the whole time. It's really weird, but I'm sorry that sometimes my train of thought takes forever to get to the station or to the end of the line. I don't know what you got. Terrible metaphor. But I might say near the end, because it's the end of the paper. Now I actually get to figure out what the change was. Went through the experience.
You are not to rely on your parents anymore.
You didn't call them stuff you didn't.
My parents will always, or let's say family, that's even more important. My family will always be incredibly important to me. But learning that I could live on my own was something I absolutely needed to, learning that I could and be who, but that's so vague. Be who I always wanted to be was something I absolutely needed to learn for myself. What? I feel like I'm being repetitive here. My family will always be incredibly important to me, but learning that I could live on my own and be who I always wanted to be was something I absolutely needed to learn for myself. Since being in college, I have not just accepted my dad's suggestions for places to work, but have gone out and found a job on my own within my interests. Additionally, I changed my major pretty quickly when I realized that the one my dad had picked for me was not at all what I really wanted to do. And now, in my chosen career, I am happier than I ever would have thought I could have been. So I'm trying to show you too, like maybe near the conclusion, like what you would do. This is technically, I think, the thesis, but here's the reasoning behind that thesis and like the examples. Because really, I think that in the conclusion, that's going to be the only place you can give those examples. And I know that generally speaking, in conclusions, have you learned that you don't include new information in a conclusion? Have they told y'all that? This is a narrative essay. So I feel like in this particular case, everything kind of adds together to show that it's the thesis and the story that you're telling shows that you changed, and there. So, but you can't really truly show you've changed. You can say that you've changed, and you can show the experience and what it did to you, but you can't prove that you've changed until after that story. And I think the only way you can do that then is in the conclusion. To add yet another paragraph, I think at the end would be lengthening the paper for no reason, and it would feel awkward. And I'm not gonna spoil the ending of, well. Y'all ever seen those movies that aren't made very well, and at the end of the movie,
Not theaters.
huh?
But they don't come out in theaters or anything.
No, not that bad. Not Hallmark movies. Does anybody have parents who watch a lot of Hallmark?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because they're not. I'm not going to say that. My parents are watching a lot of Hallmark. I think it's because they felt like all other types of movies were too uncomfortable to watch, because somebody's cursing, somebody's having sex, somebody's smoking something they shouldn't, and they get really uncomfortable seeing that, and they just start watching happy shows all the time where everything's happy. And if somebody is cheating on somebody, it's completely off screen. If somebody's got an alcohol problem, they don't drink it on screen. They're the weirdest movies. And then I wonder, like, if it, I don't know. But that's how I feel about my parents watching Hallmark. But in some of those movies where they're just not well made, they realize that the movie doesn't end well enough, and they include that bit at the end where it says, here's where they are now. Y'all have seen that, right? And it shows, like, they went on to get married, and they've got, like, 3 kids. And, like, and you see, like, the 3 kids, and it shows, like, them with the kid. Because they couldn't figure out a way to fit that in the movie, but they know their audience really wants to know. It's just poor writing. And so I feel like if you were to have this essay where you force another conclusion on there and show, like, what you're up to on top of that, like, I don't know. It just feels like it would be really super awkward. So to me, the best place to put this showing how you've changed is in the conclusion. And I've got 2 examples here. I've got, I've found my own job instead of just what my dad always told me. That shows I'm now independent, not necessarily out of the family, just choosing differently. You probably have some of your family members who are like, you're going to be a doctor. And you're like, mm-hmm. And then, like, later you'll be like, yeah, I decided to become an artist instead. Now, they'll probably stop paying for your school, but it's still your choice, right? So do not go home and tell your parents I told you not to be a doctor and to be an artist, because that's not what I'm saying. Okay? They will literally call the school and, like, threaten to burn PJC down, probably. Be like, you told him he could do art? No, I wasn't saying he could do anything you wanted. I was saying to do exactly what you're going to pay for. Because I'll take your parents' side. Man, there ain't nothing that, like, riles y'all up. My gosh. You're like some kind of neutral chemical. You're like water. It's like you throw anything into water and it's just like, well, I don't care. I'm looking for any kind of piece of cesium or sodium that reacts weirdly with y'all, and nothing seems to. You're completely inert. That's what you are. Does that help explain the answer to your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the thesis, you can be a little more vague about it in the introduction in this paper. Whereas the conclusion, you'll be a little more detailed about exactly what you meant by that thesis. And I think every paper past this, because they're not narrative, I think that they're going to be a little bit different. And they'll be very explicit in the beginning, and that thesis won't change very much in the end. I think it'll be mostly the same on future papers. Does anybody know what I'm doing? Does anybody know how this is happening? Like, have y'all wondered how I can go back and forth between 2 windows immediately?
Control tab.
And then some computers have the actual button on.
It's Alt-Tab.
Oh.
You hold Alt, and as soon as you tap Tab, all this stuff comes up.
And then just press tab.
Yeah, it's every window you've got, and you can look through them, and then
The button you click and all that comes up by itself.
if you hit what?
On the Chromebooks, they have like a tab.
There's a window.
A tab button?
They have like a piece up here that if you just press it, it'll come up.
So the new windows. The new windows edition.
By the way, I would suggest when you eventually go to a point where like you're going to university, I would suggest Chromebooks they're not the best. They're cheap, but we have some students right now who are in some kind of like either physics or statistics class or something where the program that they need to use for class that does all their homework on, like, it only runs on Windows or Mac. It will not run on a Chrome thing. So it's not going to last forever, just FYI. All right, let's get back to detail here. Did you what now? Oh, okay. I thought you said you had more stuff, more questions. So with detail, make sure in the paper you don't have to be as detailed as like monochrome, hectic clamor. You know, do be detailed. You just don't have to be super duper fancy to the point that I don't even understand what you're saying. You don't have to figure out how to fit a word like decatenate into your paper. In fact, have I told you this? Don't write with a thesaurus next to you.
With a what?
A thesaurus next to you.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
What?
Don't think you need to find smarter words. Oh yeah, that's what's that. Yeah, don't write with one next to you. There used to be physical thesauri that were in books, and you would look words up. Instead of just typing another word for blank in Google and then hoping that it gives you a good word. So, what?
Docs will actually like there's like a thesaurus on there that you don't like this word, second word.
Yeah, so, like I don't want you guys to like. I don't want to see papers that say something like my 8th grade year was going so well until my loving canine started to get sick. And I'm like, canine? Say dog. Like I don't want people looking for fancier words just for the sake of having fancier words.
What if we put that on there and we didn't look for it?
That sounds ridiculous.
I know that.
Yeah. So I want you to sound natural. That's what I want you to do. Not force big words in to sound smart. Because if you use a big word in a slightly unnatural way, you sound like a weirdo. So just try to sound like yourself. You're probably the best at sounding like yourself anyway. So do that. But in the perceptive descriptions of objects and places through the senses, as well as information as exact times, dates, geographic locations can be helpful. When I say exact times, though, don't get me like, it was 3:41 on a Tuesday, and we got the call. I don't know why that always happens, but people say that about like their death of their family member. Hey, if you want to just avoid some stuff, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but if you want to say I dropped down on my knees and cried or something people always drop down on their knees in these papers. Like I can't imagine, maybe I'm just heartless, I don't know. I can't imagine one time in my entire life where I ever heard something and maybe instantly drop to my knees and start crying.
I did that once.
I cannot imagine that ever happening.
That's just dramatic.
Yeah, I know, but it happens in papers all the time. Like, it's weird. That's not how people react to things. Like, if somebody calls and says, and your mom goes, oh, what? No. And you're like, what? What's happened, Mom? You're like, your grandmother, she died. You don't just go, but that's what they always write in the papers. That's every time I get a paper, that's what I see. I would be like, what? Are you sure? And you ask to make sure that it really happened, right? That's what people are usually in disbelief first, right? And you're asking questions. I didn't rip my pants. Okay, good. I felt like I hit my knees pretty hard. But it's just, people, like somehow, they remember things in the most dramatic way and not like as realistic as it really happened. So try to really think like what really happened in this scenario. Which is why I say the death papers can sometimes be the least grade, like the lowest grades, because people get a little too over dramatic when talking about it and don't think of how accurate it sounds. Now the trick to detail is knowing what the correct balance is. Too much detail is better than not enough, but it's important to only include details that matter. Like, for example, if I was writing a narrative essay, like the sample essay in the book, or the one that used to be there, talked about how they went to a baseball game and they said, well, the baseball game and the sound of the crowd and the smell of the hot dogs were all something I'd grown used to going to baseball games as a child, and it was great having it bring back nostalgia or something like that. But it'd be weird if it was a paper about baseball, right? It'd be very weird if I went arriving to the stadium and hearing the sound of the crowd, the smell of the hot dogs, toasted, I think, a little bit maybe grilled, but with a little bit of mustard, hot relish, bag of chips, I guess, if they have one, maybe a soda, the smell of that. Just thinking about how it tastes, man, that would be really good. Like going off into detail about how hot dogs taste in a paper about baseball and what you learn from the experience, that doesn't make any sense. So only include the right amount of detail, not too much. What now?
You should drop in the middle of the class and take on
That's probably never going to happen again. Usually, I've always told my daughter, because she has a tendency to repeat jokes, I told her, usually a joke will work once, try not to use it again. Be original, not repetitive. So that's probably the only time that will happen. Unless there's some chance. We're having another discussion about dropping on the floor. Here we go. So try to provide some variation in your writing. This is going to be true of all writing. You don't want to have sentences that sound repetitive and stilted. So you don't want to say something like, she sewed dresses, she milked cows, she fed pigs, she fed calves, she cared for chickens. It's all the same sentence structure, the same repetition over and over and over again. You could hopefully maybe go something like this. In the winter, she sewed night after night endlessly. Every morning and every evening, she milked cows, fed pigs and calves, cared for chickens. So it has that more original sound to it. It doesn't sound as repetitive. Maybe there's a little list in there, but it's just, you realize you have a bunch of things to list them all together, not in 4 different sentences where you're putting one item per sentence. It just doesn't work out that way. With description and detail? Yeah. And variation. Oh, yes, variation. Yeah, it's like that. Now, clarity in a narrative essay, the easiest way to lose clarity for the reader is to be inaccurate in terms of chronology. Because you're supposed to be talking about this is when this happened and this is when this next thing happened. So you need to try to write the story in chronological order. That we don't have enough time in this short essay for flashbacks. Well, what you have to understand is 3 years ago, like this is a very short essay. Just start 3 years ago and then move forward chronology. Yeah, that's way too far back. Let us not go back to our birth. Unless, of course, well, I mean, still, even if your grandma was there at your birth, you wouldn't want to include that in the essay because you don't remember it. You're just told, I don't know. Let's see. It's very important to be clear in verb tenses in this paper, so that's an easy way to lose some points. And it's something we do all the time. Like, this is probably how you talk when you're telling any story, is switching verb tenses back and forth. I mean, listen to this when I say it. I went to the store looking for my mother. There I was when I saw her and began talking to her. I'm telling her how I feel, and she's going to start crying in a minute. It doesn't seem that unnatural when we're saying it, but there was something very wrong with those 3 sentences. Do you know what it was? Yes, where did I switch from present tense to past? Which sentences are present and which ones are past?
You said I went to the store. I'm telling her how I feel. Wait, I don't know what you said.
I noticed y'all are reading them out loud, but you're not actually saying which one it is. First 2 are what?
Past tense and the last one present.
Yeah, first 2 are past and the last one's present. So technically what's being said there, and remember, I'm a reader, so I'm not experiencing what you're experiencing. I'm only reading it.
It also changed perspectives on this.
Yeah, it did. I mean, that's what happens when you switch verb tenses. So it says, I went to the store in the past looking for my mother in the past. There I was in the past when I saw her in the past, began talking to her in the past. But right now in the present, I'm telling her how I feel, and she's going to start crying in a minute. That's not accurate. What you're trying to say is, I told her how I felt, and then she started crying. But what we do when we're telling stories is we tell stories, we start telling it in the past, and as we get more emotionally involved with that story, we get inside of our brain, and we're like reliving it, almost like a dream in our head, and then we start to speak in the present tense because we feel like we're there. It's how we tell stories all the time. I mean, try to think the next time you're telling somebody a story what happened to you. Notice, like, it's going to be hard for you to even notice, but try to notice when you switch from past to present tenses. It will happen. It's just how we tell stories. But just don't do that in writing. You have plenty of time to think about it, plenty of time to go check. I don't know if Grammarly can even catch stuff like that. I don't use Grammarly, so, I mean, I don't like the tone of the way I said that. Did y'all hear it? I meant to just say, I don't use Grammarly, so, but it came out weird the way I said it. It sounded like I don't use Grammarly, so, like, I didn't mean to say it like that, just so you know. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. In fact, I've never used it, so I don't even know, like, what it does. Oh, so I've never used it. It's just like Netflix. I would never pay for Netflix. I'm kidding. I pay so much. Like, you have to have Netflix. We even have, like, HBO Go, because we got to watch Game of Thrones when it comes out. Clarity. So transitions will be especially important for maintaining clarity. Those are helping words. And I love this book for one reason especially, is that every single chapter, like narrative, cause, effect, comparison, contrast, has a box with appropriate words for transitions for that type of essay, it's very easy to, you know, like when we get to the research paper specifically, talking about what research people said, you say like, he said, she said, he says, she says, and it's just over and over again getting that same thing. But you could say, he asserts, Johnson maintains, tries to prove that. You know, so there's different ways of saying the same thing and being a little more clear when you're saying it that way. So in narrative essays, it says you can use words like, and that may seem obvious, but first, second, next, and later at the same time, meanwhile, immediately, soon, before, earlier, after, afterward, now, finally. All of those words help transition from one moment to the next in a narrative sense. Now, structure should be fairly simple. Introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion. But your conclusion might not seem like a conclusion normally does. It will contain your thesis, but it will also contain new information, the stuff that shows that you changed. The introduction will probably introduce this experience and say like, I had never blah 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 before until this happened. I could never have done something. And then you're going to go one after the other chronologically each paragraph. You may end up with far more than 5. I do prefer, did I tell you this the other day? I do prefer you limit yourself on this essay. Try not to go above like 1,500 words. That's getting a little long, and really 1,200 words. Because some people say, well, I just don't know how to stop my story. Well, figure out how to stop the story. Because some people, they get started and they can't stop. You know, it's like a confessional. Don't worry like, you know, you do that, you know. Especially once it gets too long, I'll be like, listen, I got a lot of essays to read. I don't have time to read one 10 times the length of all the others, because then that's a lot of information for me to keep up with my head as well. It's a little long for the topic. So you may end up with a few more paragraphs than, you know, 5, but don't go to 34. Like, that's ridiculous. I've already assigned the narrative essay, so no big deal. I was going to show you a trick for the narrative essay. Has anybody noticed this trick? Have you? You don't know. You don't know what it is yet. No, we're not doing that. So let's see. Let's go right back here. And normally, when you're getting your document formatted for, unfortunately, I have all of my stuff set so that everything's already in, basically APA and MLA format are roughly the same in terms of the format and the way it looks. So even though it's not part of APA format, I like for you to include some kind of heading. Is that right? Yep. So I like for it to say something like Magnus Baraka. What's today? 9/6/2018. By the way, it could also be 09/06/2018. By the way, it can also be 2018 09/06. By the way, it could also be September 6, 2018. I don't really care, like, as long as it's a date. Like, APA might have some regulation, but I'm not messing with that right now. So, well, what's going on there? So I guess we'll keep going here. And then we've got, shoot, what is it? English 1301 section. Probably 825 is what you're all in. And then Mr. Nichols. I don't know. I know who I am. Remember, it's Mr. Nichols. It's Nichols, not. And by the way, I don't think that I hate anybody who does this, but note that your computer will probably try to autocorrect to Nicholas. It's not my name. Nichols. Enter, center, essay 1, narrative essay. Enter, left, tab, begin. There's also another way that you'll have to tab every paragraph if you don't set it to do that on your own. How do I pin this? I need to pin this thing.
What?
Pin. There we go. Now it's going to stay. So you also need to get like the paragraph settings correct. I'd say for this essay, you want double line spacing, 0, 0 before, 0, 0 up here as well. Make sure all those are zeros. And then have a special first line indent of a 1/2 inch. That way you don't hit tab every time. Boom. Everything's set to go, except for the page margins. Make sure they're all 1 inch. Boom. Find the one that says 1 inch. There usually is one. But there's a little trick. You don't have to do all that stuff. Oh, by the way, I do want Times New Roman font. If you give me any other font, I'll be pissed. It's easy. Don't do Calibri. What?
Do you care about font size?
12. Yeah, it says it in the syllabus. Let's see. So if you're looking for like, where do I find that? Let me go in here to Magnus Baraka. Magnus Baraka is lazy, so he's going to do this the easy way. 1301. Assignments, by the way, still, if you need to get those in, get those in. Personal schedule form, information form. If you suddenly realize that you have exactly the friends down that you want to use as part of your group, and they are going to put you down as well, and you all want to make sure that you got the form in, send that in. Because I want to remind you, if the 3 people in the group, 2 people put each other down, but the 3rd person forgot to submit theirs, that person's not in the group. So, sorry. I don't know that person wanted to be a part of the group. They may have refused to submit because they're like, I don't want to accidentally be put with those people. If you leave the boxes blank, I'm not going to put you together. So I'm going to go to Assignments Individual here. And instead of clicking PDF, I'm going to click the docx file. X files. Save. Open. Page down, page down. Wasn't there a sample essay? There was.
I thought Magnus Baraka was lazy.
He is, that's why he's doing this.
Oh, that's plagiarism.
Get rid of the rest of the paper. This is where I'll start writing. No, that's actually a little too far back. Let's do this. Maybe I'll start my paper with the. No, I can just start it with start here, and then I'll do that. I really don't want the word space though, so don't think you have to include. That's just where I want the spaces to be. Enter, 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 boom. Narrative essay. Oh, I want the assignment there? I don't really care. 825, 18, 06, 9. Boom, ready to go. That was a lot faster. I think that the only thing I think that won't fix is the margins, which is 1 inch. And as you said, the title, essay 1, narrative essay. Usually on these essays, I don't want some special extra title, with the exception, I think, maybe of the research paper. So you don't need to do something like a dangerous new place. I don't want anything like that. Just leave it. I want to be able to tell that it's the right essay from the start. Because sometimes I do have students accidentally submit the wrong essay, and it's easier for me to see there if they did. Questions? Bye.